This is it, ladies and gentlemen. The first day of Mythic Plus has been had and people have been playing specs and DPSers in this particular case. And now we have some rankings to talk about because it is fun to look at the overall meta for the first day of Season 3 patch 11.2 because we do want to take a look at how specs will evolve across time, how buffs and nerfs will affect them, how player perception and also gameplay will affect them because that will matter in a few seconds. To start it off, we're gonna go with Frost DK first, which is obviously S tier. To nobody's surprise, and will likely remain S tier for the rest of the season. I doubt the nerfs of Frost DK that are probably going to come at some point, I think, anyway. I'm not sure if it needs nerfs anymore because it has been nerfed on the P tier for quite a while. Even after those nerfs, it's most likely still going to be S tier because the damage is not going to be tanked. I mean, I hope not because there is a spec in today's tier list that will be tanked. So you still want the DK utility for a lot of the other stuff. Not as much for Unholy DK, which is A+, meaning that it's doing keys just a little bit below Unholy, and it does seem to have a decent amount of damage, and it's likely that most very, very good Death Knights right now are not playing Unholy, but they're most likely playing Frost, which is going to be true for a lot of the specs in today's tier list. So the performance will be skewed since not everybody has their tier set right now. So the damage will obviously differ from the ones that have the old set to the ones that have 2-piece and 2-piece to the ones that might actually be lucky enough to have the new 4 set, which is what the new specs are balanced around. All of the aggregated data that we have used for this tier list comes from public websites like Warcraft Logs, where we double and triple check all the information because reliability is very important to us, since websites nowadays can just be very sketchy. And that's where today's sponsor comes in, porkbun.com. Makes me hungry just thinking about it. Porkbun is an accredited domain registrar that offers their incredibly affordable services to everyone from individual users to business owners and have been named the #1 domain registrar by USA Today for 3 years straight. But what we will be talking about today is their current partnership with ProtonMail to offer secure and safe email hosting using Porkbun domains. This is a great way to keep conversations private between you and your recipients in this ever-growing world of information accessible across the globe. The service is intended for anyone from entrepreneurs, freelancers, to simply users looking to have a more secure web presence. You can access a lot more secure options with Proton like Proton Calendar, Drive, VPN, and Pass, depending on your needs and preferences, all within just a few minutes of setup. You can start using Proton Mail Essentials or Professional plans as a Porkbun customer, starting with $5.99 a month for the first year. To get started, simply click our link in the description or pinned comments to go to porkbun.com/Marcelian25, and you will also be supporting the channel while making sure your email communications are secure and reliable. Moving on to Havoc, surprisingly, the top Havocs right now are keeping up with the top keys being cleared, period. Now, Havoc has had a little bit more love this time around in the PTR leading up to the season starting, and I do believe that they're in a much better position. Also, keeping in mind that Havoc does have access to some of the damage profile that people have fallen in love with the last couple of seasons. The priority damage profile, by the way, however, that damage profile has always existed and has always made the specs that used to be able to engage in that type of damage dealing meta specs, which is Fire Mage and has been Fire Mage ever since BFA, since most of the time that Fire Mage was played with just single target and then ignite spreads to all other targets. That's what Havoc has right now in Wounded Quarry. I guess it's kind of different. I think Wounded Quarry just takes the damage that you deal to every other target and put it into your main targets. And I guess that's kind of like a different way of doing funnel damage or whatever you want to call it. But at the end of the day, it is doing more damage to one particular target. Now, moving on to Balanced Druid, it's had seen better days. You can argue that maybe A tier is not that bad for balance, all things considered. Once again, this is just the very first day. And I'm not going to keep saying this for every spec since I know people will skip to their desired specs and that's perfectly fine, but I cannot make 26 disclaimers of the same kind for every individual specs. not everybody's playing Mythic Plus. A lot of people are probably progressing through the raid. There are a lot of really good Mythic Plus pushers that are probably going through their Mythic progression or Heroic progression, getting their 4-set before focusing on pushing dungeons to kind of put out the actual performance that their specs can handle. However, I don't have high expectations for balanced Druids unless there's some weird-ass calculation that everybody has missed on the PTR, since judging by the PTR status, balanced Druid has been nerfed quite a bit from its Season 2 counterpart. Not something that we can say about Feral, and for the first time, Feral, well, not for the first time, but in very rare occasions, Feral has been able to outperform Balanced Druid in Mythic Plus. This is one of those times. How long will it last? It's hard to say. Feral was buffed last minute on the PTR going into Season 3 with some more single target buffs, which are really great, especially for Mythic Plus, because Feral AoE wasn't necessarily bad. It was also uncapped, much to people's surprise maybe, because Primal Wrath is essentially uncapped. Obviously, it's not the same as spamming Starfall and not the same as spamming Epidemic and things like that, but it is really good. You don't really see Feral in groups that pool really big most of the time, since Feral is played in the more, what we like to call it these days, physical comp, and physical comp usually plays warriors, and warriors are AoE capped, plays monks, monks are AoE capped, and you don't really see those big pulls happening. But so far, Feral is looking pretty snazzy. For a lot of people's surprise, maybe, but definitely to my own, Augmentation is not doing too good, and I honestly thought Augmentation is going to be fine, and it's probably going to be fine in the end, but as it stands right now, it is what we would probably consider F tier. It's not bad, but it's F tier is probably going to be reserved for those specs that still haven't consistently cleared keys over 10 right now, because that's what we're looking at the moment. It is the first day of Mythic Plus. By the time you see this, maybe it's the 3rd or 4th day, so just keep that in mind. But as it stands right now, it's not one of the specs that people push really high with. It's not one of those specs that people want in their group. Now, that doesn't mean it's necessarily bad. I actually think that maybe Augmentation is one of its best state ever, not necessarily in terms of performance, but maybe its design, where it's slowly transitioning to more of a DPS focused role with decent utility and buffs to party, but not an actual full-fledged support. Now, until those numbers are realized and people can see its value, it's likely going to be F tier, but I would expect it to climb as the season goes on, and when we revisit this, we'll see if I was correct or not. Another actual surprise is Devastation, because I honestly pegged this for being way better. And I think maybe one of our meta predictions or meta analysis for Season 3, because I know a lot of people have been doing this, I think we're one of the only ones that have ranked Devastation higher. A lot of people seem to have ranked it lower, which seems to be the case now, so maybe we were wrong, but I would be curious to see once Devastation gets the 4-set, because I'm pretty sure not all of the Devastations or the best Devastations have gotten their 4-set yet, to see it not rise to at least A+ tier. I initially thought it was going to be S tier. Now, it's likely not going to be S tier for one big reason, and I think it's a very important reason, and that is its squishiness. I guess it kind of depends on what tanks and healers we get this season overall, because right now all of the tanks are clearing all of the top keys, but depending on the external availability of the party composition, you can probably justify having an Evoker in, because we've had Shamans in the past in S tier, and they're maybe just as squishy, if not even squishier. So if Shamans can pull it off, surely Lizards can as well. Beast Mastery, also very surprisingly, I thought it was going to be way higher. I think it has to do with the fact that in our latest video, I made a mistake where I said that the tier set for Beast Mastery was nerfed, but it was in actuality the Season 2 tier set and not the Season 3, and that might have also affected its current positioning right now, because Beast Mastery was also suspected to be one of the best DPS players, but as it stands right now, it's A tier. I mean, obviously A tier is not bad, it's like right there, but it's not S tier as what probably a lot of people were hoping for or expecting it to be. Marksmanship is doing decently better at the moment. Also one of the contenders for one of the better DPS players this season, which is great because we don't really see Marksmanship perform in Mythic Plus at the very top for very consistent amount of times. So it's great to see Marksmanship so far being this good, but it's likely going to get better, in my opinion, as top Marksmanship hunters get their gear and insofar. But also, just to kind of roll back a little bit, so we don't usually do this, but for Beast Mastery, I do want to point out that as of recording this, you can probably see it on screen right now, the top key, the best time for any key clear right now is done by a group with Banshers, the probably best hunter in the world at this point, that's playing Beast Mastery in the top key. Man is playing both Beast Mastery and MM, so that's not really the point. But just because of that, Beast Mash is not necessarily a bad thing, and you can or bad spec, and you can take this to mean for every other spec, marksmanship included, and the rest in the list as well. It depends on how often it is played, because not everybody has their score right now, and a lot of the rankings that we were going to engage in are also based on overall dungeon score, which is why survival is actually fairly low. One of the few specs that hasn't cleared +10s across the board, and it is actually, if you look at, I think, both Arcane.gg, but also Warcraft Logs, both of these websites rank survival as the only really low specs. I think Arcane.gg just has everybody in S tier accepting survival, which I kind of disagree with in the grand scheme of things, but you know, it's fair. It's everybody to their own. But survival is actually suffering. Now, there are dungeons and times when survival can out DPS other people, but it's still too early to tell. Again, to nobody's surprise, Arcane is currently S tier because it's doing what it has been doing so far, but even better, where it has, I believe, more single target this time around, probably less AoE than in the past, but the single target is so good, man. It kind of sucks for the other fire mages, and now that we're going for it, it is unreal how bad fire performs right now. Now, I was talking to Marcelian just before we started recording this, and he made a very good point. That's most likely the fire mage that we're going to have in Season 3 is tuned around the Season 3 tier set, and the fire mages that are clearing keys right now don't really have the new tier set, so that's probably why it's so low. But it is funny that it was just nerfed on the PTR before it went live, and it's now F tier. And before it was nerfed, it was, I guess, A+ tier. So I think there's a biased hatred at Blizzard for Fire Mage. I want to say this is not really true, but it's my feelings and I'm emotional about it, so leave me alone. But it might be a bias towards Fire Mage at Blizzard, because it is funny how third season in a row, while it's doing above average damage, it's just getting nerfed to bottom of the barrel again consistently. Kind of makes people like myself that really enjoy playing Fire Mage really sad, since it doesn't feel like we have any hope of being competitive. Frost Mage, actually I was hoping this would be a little bit higher, but once again, maybe it's because of the top Frost Mages are not usually using their tier set, so they're lacking that extra oomph that they need to push for higher keys. I might expect that this would be at least A+ tier, even though I believe it has been nerfed by 3% in one of the recent videos that we did covering the last minute tuning. So I don't think 3% would knock down a tier. However, that might have skewed the perception of Frost's performance for a lot of the mages, and they might have just gravitated towards Arcane more. So that skewed the overall ranking of Frost Mage and pushed it down a little bit more, when in fact it might actually just be just as good as any other A+ tier, or maybe even S tier. Something that's not S tier anytime soon or ever in M+ is definitely going to be Windwalker. Currently, well, in Season 2, statistically the worst performing Mythic Plus spec, and this has not changed going into Season 3. The tier set is really good. It offers some options. It has a niche. It has really good single target. It's kind of like a budget Temu AliExpress Arcane Mage in physical comp groups. The top groups that are clearing keys as of recording this video are physical comp groups, like I mentioned before, and the Monk spot is being held by the Mistweaver and not the Windwalker. I was actually expecting it to be held by the Brewmaster, and even so, Windwalker seems to be the last type of monk you would want in a group in terms of the overall performance. That doesn't mean it's necessarily bad. I mean, it's my current main, and you do a decent amount of damage, and probably very high damage in super small pools, like 4 or 5 target pools. Hence, you know, the discussion that we had on Feral, but it doesn't look like it's going to turn any heads anytime soon, 100% because of the AoE cap, which will always limit Windwalker. Ret Paladin is doing slightly better. Despite all of the poor performance that it had on the PTR, it is doing really good after the buffs. It is also probably in part because the Season 2 tier set is so good for Ret Paladin that it's still letting it compete with all the other specs. Now, I don't know if the power imbalance will skew in favor of every other spec outside Paladin when it comes to everybody getting their 4 set, their Mana Forge 4 set. So Ret might actually drop. I don't expect it to rise any higher unless it's going to get more buffs. I don't think Ret is as good in Season 3 as it was in Season 2. But that's a prediction based off of some information that we have available. Shadow Priest is doing decently as well. It's going to be all the way down into A tier, which is not really down. It's kind of like at the top of the ranking. But people see anything that's not S tier as being bad in the game. So what can you do? It's doing really well. It has gone through a roller coaster of changes on the PTR as we're going into Season 3. So it's very hard to pinpoint where exactly this will be because it was super strong at the beginning of the PTR. Then it got giga nerfed. Then it got buffed again. So now maybe it's just like middle of the pack. You'll definitely probably see more Shadow Priest. Since you do want priests, the spells are really good this time around. Well, maybe not, because they did nerf the Halls of Atonement dispel situation, so maybe you don't want that many dispels anymore. One spec that I don't like where I'm going to be putting, and that is Assassination Rogue, and I'm putting it into A+. I would want to put it into S tier, but the data so far doesn't let me put that into S tier, but I do believe this is way stronger than people give it credit for. It is the melee version of Arcane Mage. It has really, really good priority damage and very good boss damage. And that priority damage actually splashes into way more AoE than Arcane does. At least that's how it seems at the moment. So it doesn't do as much single target damage as Arcane, but it does way more AoE damage while still retaining very good priority damage. So I believe Assassination actually has a lot of value in this meta. Now, whether or not people make it work, because right now it seems like Outlaw is the one that's cracking the most, remains to be seen. I do believe that Outlaw might not be better than Assassination by the end of the season, unless it's gonna get some like significant buffs, but it might be just easier scaling at the moment before everybody just gets their gears cranking. Subtlety, however, is... I think every season Subtlety starts either middle of the pack or below middle of the pack, and then it just slowly climbs up. There's no real redeeming qualities of Subtlety over any other of the rogues. The consistent AoE damage that, let's say, Trickster brings is kind of like done better by Outlaw. The single target priority damage of Deathmark, or Deathstalker rather, is done better by Assassination. One thing that Subtlety can do probably better than the other rogue specs is just the constant access to burst in Shadow Dance. You don't really do anything outside of the burst, but if you do play, let's say, relatively small pools, relatively frequent pools, which I would suspect the melee physical comp groups will end up doing if they will keep up that meta, it might be better than maybe at least Outlaw, but it remains to be seen. Numbers will tell the story in the end. Elemental is S tier. I am not really surprised. It is a very good spec this season, but I made the point with, I was going to say Evoker, but I guess it's just Devastation. It is a squishy class, not just Elemental Enhancement as well, but it is squishy, and that might become a problem later on. However, it seems like this season is a little bit more forgiving for squishy specs, and it might require a little bit more damage. Now, I don't know if there's any spec in the game that can probably top Elemental in just pure AoE raw power during your main cooldowns. Maybe I'm missing something with Frost DK, but I'm pretty sure that take two equally skilled players and give them infinite AoE, Elemental will probably outscale Frost DK. So that is my opinion. Of course, since we don't see that situation happen very often or at all, the single target, it might be a bigger problem for Elemental than for any other, let's say, S tier spec at the moment. But that has been buffed significantly, or not significantly, but rather consistently on the PTR. Enhancement is still, bro, I don't understand. Okay, this spec has been consistently A or above in the last 3-4 seasons. Enhancement players have to be one of the most content and, let's say, generally happy players overall. It does have bugs. It does have like an imbalance between hero talents, but that's always going to be there. What are you going to do? However, Enhancement just seems really good. It's never going to be S tier where you're risking nerfs all of the time, and it's not really too bad where you're like, oh my god, are we going to get an Enhancement? I think this is just really solid. I think the problem of squishiness probably affects Enhancement way more than Elemental. I feel like there's a lot more danger being a melee this season than it is being a ranged, especially if you don't have the defensives, since range has, let's say, more range to deal with potential dangerous mechanics. Affliction, despite what Warcraft Logs and Arcane.gg would have you believe, which is just data. They don't have an agenda, okay? Affliction is not the best spec in the game at the moment, although I would love to see it. Bro, I swear to God, I would nerf every spec in a game if we could see Affliction S tier taken into M+. I want to see a season of Warlock, man. I want to see how the immobility of Warlocks is gonna affect actually keep pushing in a season. But right now, as it stands, it's decent. It's actually the best Warlock spec performing as of this video, because Demonology is going to be B tier, especially after the recent nerfs. It could be, like I said, once again, just a community perception where nerfing Demonology just before the season starts might make more Warlocks go, holy shit, they just nerfed us, let's play Affliction, or let's play Destro. Well, maybe not Destro, because Destro is not very much better. However, in Destro's defense, it is a spec similarly to Elemental, where it scales really well with AoE. And it has received, I believe, maybe more single target buffs than Elemental on the PTR, with all of the Chaos Bolts that's been buffed. I don't remember if Incinerate was buffed as well, but I'm pretty sure Destro has received more single target buffs this PTR than in past seasons. So hopefully it's not just an AoE one-trick pony. Arms Warrior is currently A tier, doing a little bit better. Arms Warrior has potential to be a little bit higher, but nothing particularly amazing has happened going into Season 3 for Arms to change the overall performance of the spec. Obviously, everybody gets their tier set, but nothing else. Like, we've known Frost DK has been reworked, and now it's like the black sheep, the elephant in the room, the whatever you want to call it, right? Havoc is doing way better. Arcane is just like everybody's most hated spec at the moment. But Arms has just been silent, just flying under the radar with like almost no changes whatsoever. Oh, here's a tier set. Let me just balance a little bit. To be fair, Warrior has been, similarly to Shadow Priest, a roller coaster of tuning on the PTR, where it doesn't really seem like they are nailing exactly where the spot is to be. And rounding it all up with Fury Warrior, I will have to put this into S tier, much to my better judgment. And this is only because the top keys, as of recording this video, are done by the physical comm groups, which have Noxic, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name, bro. Big props for holding down the flag for Fury Warriors. But if you look at the overall damage breakdown of the party that has Fury Warriors are down bad still. I feel like they're better than last season, but it still feels like they're just way behind. For similar reasons why Windwalker is probably not going to be an S tier. I would be surprised if Fury is going to remain S tier. I would be surprised if it's going to be A+ tier in a month's time. I feel like it's going to just drop down. I feel like the main reason why Fury is so high up at the moment is it's the buff provider for Battle Shout in those physical comm groups. And that's not brought by the Pro Warrior. I think it's just a consequence of comps, and the top group of pushing keys right now just have, I think it's Squish Vegan that's playing Bear. So because of that, they don't have the Pro Warrior in their group. But this is how it looks at the moment. It's all chaos and all over the place. However, we did try our best to kind of differentiate the specs, because in reality, what you probably see on Arcane.gg and Warcraft Logs is probably accurate right now. Everybody's just way better at doing +10s and getting their KSMs and stuff like that, probably going into +12s once everybody gives their key. So that is actually a good indicator for anybody out there that wants to do pug keys and invite specs. Bro, everybody is good to do 10, 12 keys, which is what most people will end up doing anyway. So don't look at these tier lists and figure out, oh shit, we're definitely not gonna invite Fire Mages. Actually, don't invite Fire Mages, because if that leads to Fire Mage being buffed, I will be the first one to thank you very much also for watching this video. But also, thank you to Porkbon and Proton for sponsoring our video. Make sure to use our link in the description and pinned comment to get a secure and reliable email that protects your privacy.